تعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون صلوا على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Last night I was trying to clear up some of the misconceptions, some of the questions that are posed by our own youths, sometimes by our fellow Muslims regarding our beliefs, our practices, why we do certain things. And today I want to continue along the same line but with a different angle, which is some of the issues which are raised by non-Muslims, by Americans, regarding the Quran, regarding how Muslims treat women, etc., and how we should respond to that. Again, our attitude must always be one of respect and proper behavior without being insulting, but at the same time to be firm and to explain to them why we believe what we believe and why we do what we do. In recent times, as you are aware, there has been an increasing amount of Islamophobia. By the way, Islamophobia, the word phobia means anxiety, fear of. So Islamophobia means fear of Islam, to be anxious about Islam. And this has been promoted by the media especially, but not only the media, by fundamentalist Christian groups, as you are aware. You are in that part of the country, by the way. Texas, Arizona is very what we may call a fundamentalist group. And the media, when you look at it, whenever it portrays a Muslim, for example, Muslim is never seen in positive term. In the cartoons and the caricatures that they draw, a Muslim is somebody always who is dressed like an Arab coming from Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan, etc., looking very kind of stern and angry, and his wife is walking like 10 miles behind him, you know. This is how they portray Muslims. I don't know about you, but my wife walks in front of me. But in any case, the point being, and even when they portray Muslim women in the media, in the American media, are portrayed as oppressed and humble and submissive, you know. They are never this very smart CEOs, well-dressed Muslim women. They're never portrayed like that. And it's time for us to correct some of these misconceptions. These kind of misconceptions have been especially forthcoming after the events of 9/11. We know what happened in 9/11. But fundamentalist Christians have said, for example, Franklin Graham, if you followed him, I don't know why you would, but he is the son of Billy Graham, said that Islam is a very evil religion. Terry Jones, if you recall, the pastor in Florida, who actually burns the Quran. And we've had so many other cases, I don't need to go into details. But this anti-Islamic propaganda is nothing new. One thing that we should realize, that the West saw Islam as a threat from the beginning of Islam. It may have increased now, yes, but this anti-Islamic propaganda or anti-Islamic material comes right from the beginning. It saw Islam, Christianity saw Islam as a threat for different reasons. One, because Islam challenged some of the key Christian beliefs regarding the Trinity, regarding the resurrection of Jesus. That Islam said, no, Jesus wasn't God, he wasn't the Son of God, he was a prophet of God. So in many ways, Islam corrected Christianity. And remember, whenever there is another religion which comes after a previous religion, the previous religion will always see their next religion as a threat. Another reason why Christianity saw Islam as a threat is because Islam, like Christianity, is a universal religion. It tries to invite people towards, so does Christianity. It tries to evangelize. And therefore you had Christian missionaries in different parts of the world, and so were Muslims missionaries. They were clashing with each other. And for other reasons also, military, etc., there was always this tension between Islam and Christianity, Islam and the West. However, just to give you an example of how vicious some of these slander against Islam took, They argued, for example, in the early literature, we're talking of the 8th, 9th century Christians writing. They said the Prophet died in 666, the year 666. Actually, he died in 632. He did not die in 666. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib died in 661. So how can the Prophet die in 666? Imam Ali died in the year 661. The Prophet died in 632. The question arises, why would they say the Prophet died in the year 666? Because 666 is the number of beasts, shayateen to be exact, in the Bible, which shows the end of time. One of the end of time alamat, if you like, signs of the end of time, the apocalypse, is there will be 666 beasts. So they tried to portray the Prophet, na'udhu billah, as a beast. If you look at the name that they call the Prophet, and again, we have to say this with a lot of regret, but just to show you how they try to demonize the Prophet. They call him Mahund. Now, if you have read or even come across the word Mahund in Salman Rushdie's book, I don't know why you want to read his book, but by the way, it has a lot of swear words. You guys don't understand it because I do, because it's in my language. He is Gujarati originally, and he speaks the Gujarati language, which is the worst kind of, some of the worst swear words that he uses. Most people don't know him because they don't understand Gujarati, and they actually gave him so much money because of that. But one of the things he addresses the Prophet as, Salman Rushdie does, is Mahund. He did not invent the term Mahund, it was in the medieval ages. Mahund means the devil. Now, this slander against Muslims and against Islam has taken different forms. One of the words that you might want to Google is the word mammetry. M-A-M-M-E-T-R-Y. M-A-M-M-E-T-R-Y. Mammetry means literally those who worship idols. They used to call our Prophet Mehmet. Instead of Muhammad, they used to call him Mehmet. In other words, Muslims worship an idol called Muhammad. And the word is until today in the English language. You check your dictionary and Google it, and you will see mammetry means the act of worshipping idols. And it comes from Mehmet or Muhammad. It's a perversion of the word Muhammad. Now, a lot of you enjoy, I'm sure, eating croissant. Huh? You know what's a croissant? And we all eat, I eat it sometimes too. But have you noticed the shape of the croissant? What is it shaped like? A crescent. Who uses the crescent as a symbol? Muslims do. Have you ever wondered why the shape of the crescent? Is there some kind of link between croissant, crescent, and Muslims? Now, this is just one major theory, but the answer is yes. Because in the year 1689, Muslims, the Ottoman Muslims, were on the verge of conquering Austria. They were actually on the outskirts of Vienna. They were going to conquer, but they got defeated. In order to celebrate the defeat of Muslims, when in 1689, the French bakers in Austria made a bread in the shape of a crescent to show that they attained victory over those who had the crescent as a symbol. And hence you have the croissant today. And I'm not telling you don't eat the croissant, but I'm telling you the possible and probable origins of this concept of a croissant. These are just some, if not more, of the anti-Muslim rhetoric that have survived till today. Sallu ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
One of the main criticism against Islam, and you have heard this many a time, is that Islam spread by the sword. That Muslims became victorious and spread all over the world because of the sword. The answer is completely wrong. To start with, no Muslim ever set foot in sub-Saharan Africa. Where I come from, East Africa, West Africa, Islam spread through either the mystics or through marriages or Muslims just coming in as traders. There was never a conquest of Africa. So, This idea that Muslims or Islam spread by the sword is actually wrong from the Quran itself. Because the Quran says, La ikraha fit deen. There is no compulsion in religion. As I said the other night, the Quran says to the Prophet, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَآمَنَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. If your Lord had wished, everybody would have believed. Allah does not want to impose belief on anybody. Who are we to do it? In the olden days, I don't know how many of you will remember, but those who are seniors like myself will recall the image that they had in the textbooks, by the way. In the textbooks, in the newspaper, everywhere in the West, a Muslim is one who's seated on a horse with the Quran in one hand and the sword in the other. Either this or that. Do you remember that? If we were to take that image correctly, then we'd also have to accept that all Muslims are left-handed. Because Muslims hold the Quran in the right hand, so they're always fighting with the left hand. I can barely move my left hand, let alone fight with it. It is totally wrong. Consider this much. Muslims were in Spain for almost 800 years. How many? 800 years. From the year of the grocery store. Have you heard of the year of the grocery store? No. 7-Eleven. That's what the year of the grocery store. From the year of the grocery store, from 7-Eleven, until the year that Columbus got lost. He did not discover America, he got lost. He was heading to the east, he ended up in the west, and he got his GPS all messed up. And he became a hero because of that. So from 7-Eleven until 1492, Muslims were in Spain. Now, if Muslims had forcibly converted people to Islam, there would have been no Christians left in Spain to drive the Muslims out. 1492, for those who have studied the history, was the year of not only the reconquest of Spain, but also the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, by Ferdinand and Isabella. That's historical. What I'm trying to say is this: Muslims were in Spain for 800 years. If Muslims were required or forced to forcibly convert, then there will be no Christians left. In fact, on the contrary, when you study the history of Spain and look at Spain and go to Spain, by the way, it is ours. Andalus is ours. Muslims built one of the best civilization on earth in Spain. And they did it with Christians and Jews together. In fact, they used to say in those days, in the period when Muslims were in Spain, that if you have been to Spain, you cannot go to hell because you've already been to heaven. Because you've already been to heaven, you cannot go to hell. Indeed, Muslims not only cooperated and lived with them, when the Christians reconquered Spain after 1492, they gave Muslims and Jews two choices mainly. Either you convert or we kill you. And if you don't do that, then you get out. So the majority of the Jews living in Spain, they left Spain. And you know where they went? They went to Muslim land. Because they knew that Islam and Muslims will actually protect us. If you look into Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, what we call the Maghreb, until today, there are so many Jews. These are called Sephardic Jews, Mediterranean Jews, who are very different from the Ashkenazim Jews. The Ashkenazim Jews are the Jews of Europe. What I'm trying to say is this idea that Muslims and Islam came with a sword is totally wrong. Muslims, a lot of people here are from Pakistan, India. Muslims were the rulers in India for no less, maybe more than 300 years, right? The Mughals were who? Were Muslims. We got a long history of them. If Islam went to India and says, you must become Muslims, otherwise we'll kill you. There were no Christians or Jews mainly in India, few of them. The majority were Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and then later on Sikhs, correct? And yet Muslims actually lived with them, even though they were the rulers, and protected them. So this idea, and Islam spread in different parts of the world. One thing that you will notice about Islam, and this is a response that we must try to give respectfully to non-Muslims, that Islam not only protected local people wherever it went, it also protected and nurtured local culture, local artifacts, local history. It protected even local music and so on. Everywhere you go. A lot of you people, brothers and sisters, are from Afghanistan, I know. But weren't there not pre-Islamic artifacts and history in Afghanistan? You remember the Bamiyan Buddha's statues? Did Muslims protect those until it took those crazy Taliban to go and blow them up? If Islam was against all statues and so on, then Muslims would have destroyed those Buddha statues long time ago. They were there before Islam. If you go to Egypt today, you go to the museum, they will show you what kind of bowl of soup that Tutankhamun used to drink from, what kind of shoe that Pharaoh used to wear. Till today they do that. It is, as I say, wherever you go in the Islamic world, you go to Iran also, there are Zoroastrian temples, history of the Zoroastrian kings, King Cyrus, and so on. So Muslims did not go around just destroying people, destroying local history, destroying. On the contrary, it preserved them. It is ironic, and this is the punchline, that Muslims have preserved more of pre-Islamic history than their own history. They have preserved more of pre-Islamic history than their own history. And if you want to know, go to Saudi Arabia. No Islamic history is left over. Na'udhu billah, this is a shame, but this is true. The place where Hazrat Khadija used to live is now a public washroom. Yes. The place where Uhud took place, a war of Uhud, which was so important, Badr. There's nothing there today if you go, apart from a big plateau saying it is haram to worship the dead. Who worships the dead? But what happened there? Why is it so important? There's absolutely nothing there. In other words, Muslims have preserved the pre-Islamic history more than their own history. Sallu ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
My sisters and brothers, it is important for us to remember this, that Muslims not only protected the local people, their culture, their music, their way of life, but it also gave to the West a lot that we have today. We may not realize this, but a lot of the Western sciences, the philosophy, etc., came from where? Through Spain. Spain was a bridge between the West and the East. In fact, if you have been to Spain or you want to go to Spain, go and visit places like Cordoba, Granada, Sevilla, Barcelona, and so on. These were all Islamic places, my friend. There were literally 400,000 manuscripts, Islamic manuscripts. You know where? In Toledo, not in Ohio. Toledo in Spain. At a time when the West used to say that the Africans cannot read or write, we are talking about the 13th, 14th centuries, in a place called Timbuktu. Have you heard of Timbuktu? You know what Timbuktu is? When I ask my students, they say somewhere in Greenland. It is actually in Mali, in Africa. There were 25,000 scholars graduating in Timbuktu every year. Over 250 places of education in Timbuktu. And we know this because there is a very famous scholar in America, I believe he's at Harvard, called Henry Gates, no relation to Bill. Henry Gates is a specialist in African history and Islam. He has produced documentaries to show the amount of Muslim Arabic literature we came from the Africans in Timbuktu and other places near Timbuktu. Remember this much, my sisters and brothers. Islam contributed immensely to the Western civilization. Wherever Islam went, there was a center of learning, because Islam believed in learning. So Muslims had centers of learning in Cordoba, in Spain, in Damascus, in Baghdad, in Timbuktu, wherever it went. And you can see the vestiges, the legacy of Islam even in the English language today. Wherever you see the word AL in English, know that it comes from Arabic, because the word al in Arabic means the definite article. And whenever there is AL in English language, it has something to do with science or education. Example, algebra, alchemy, algorithm, almanach, and before you ask, alcohol too. But not Al Gore, we don't want him, thank you. That goes to show, and Western philosophy came through Greek philosophy and it came through the Arabs themselves. We have so many other examples, I don't have the time to go into this, but I hope that I have proven the point of how Islam actually contributed to the West. I was saying about the Jews, and again, we are always told that the Arabs are this and Muslims are that. The Jews were always protected much better by the Muslims than by the Christians. There are two types of Jews. I mentioned Sephardic and Ashkenazim Jews. This is historical, you can check it out. Sephardic are those who live in the Mediterranean, those Jews who had been expelled from Spain. The Ashkenazim Jews are those in Europe. The Jews living under Muslim rule were the Sephardic, in the Mediterranean Jews. They were allowed to keep their own religion, their own culture, their own music, their own law also. Islam says you cannot impose your law on anybody else, even in your own country. For those who think that we are trying to impose the Sharia in America, Islam says you cannot impose the Sharia on non-Muslims in your own country. How can you impose it on non-Muslim country? Because Jews and Christians living under Muslim lands were governed by their own laws. Absolutely. This is what Islam says. So if we cannot impose the Sharia on non-Muslims in our own country, how can we impose it on others? Therefore, you find that the Sephardic Jews, they fared much better than Ashkenazim Jews. If you look at the story of the European Jews, they suffered tremendously, whether it was in Czechoslovakia, in Poland, in France, in Germany, in England. We've all heard of the pogroms. Pogroms are state-sponsored discrimination. We've heard of the Holocaust. We've heard of mass exile of Jews, sometimes mass killing in Russia, and so on. They never suffered like that under Muslim rule. Because Islam required Muslims to behave properly with non-Muslims. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alayhi Muhammad.
One of the key terms that you hear about so much is anti-Semitic. Anybody who says anything even against Israel, we're not talking about Jews, anti-Semitic. One thing we have to realize that Semites are not only Jews. Arabs are also Semites. Semites are those who come from a particular land in the Middle East with a particular background, from Nubia and so on. So Jews are Semites, and so are Arabs. So therefore Muslims never had an anti-Semitic history, because they cannot be against their own selves. Arabic is a Semitic language, just as Hebrew is. So this idea that Muslims were against Jews, etc., is totally wrong. In fact, and this is where I think sometimes we depend on non-Muslim scholars than our own fellow Muslims. They have done a lot of research in this. One of the great scholars is a person by the name of Professor Richard Bulliard. He has done a tremendous service to Islam. Yesterday I was talking about Wilfred Madelung, if you remember, Succession to Muhammad. Richard Bulliard has done tremendous service in videos that he has produced. But in one of these he says in his book, he says, wherever Islam went, it actually did not impose itself on the local people. Muslims were in Persia, in Iran, by the year 640. Iran continued to remain Zoroastrian until at least 200 years after Islam went there. The majority continued to be Zoroastrian. The conversion was gradual. Islam went to Iraq and Syria soon after the Prophet died. Up to 150 years after Islam reached Iraq and Syria, the majority continued to remain Byzantine Christians, because that was the local religion before. In other words, the conversion was gradual, it was slow, it was not by the sword. And we can go on and on about this. I think I've made the point. The question then that is often raised is the question of violence, that Muslims are violent because the Quran is violent. I do not know if you are following the news. Tillerson has said that now they're trying to convert all the books in Saudi Arabia, to remove them and put new books, textbooks. Soon they'll even try to create a new Quran also, to get rid of this violence. But actually it's amazing that the Old Testament, have you heard of the Old Testament? You know the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. When I ask my students, what's the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, they say one is old, the other one is new. My students are very clever. When I asked them what was Abraham's wife's name, but remember the Abraham's wife's name? They said Mrs. Abraham. So you can't, You can't win them. These students are very clever. It was actually Sarah and Hagar. In any case then, the Old Testament is the what we call the Biblical Testament also, the Hebrew Bible, which is primarily what the Jews believe in. It does not contain anything about Jesus. The Old Testament contains far more violence than the Quran does. And I will show you what it says in many, many cases. For example, to give you just a few examples, and I'm not trying to bash the Bible, I'm just giving you examples. The book of Deuteronomy, for example, calls on the children of Israel to kill all the inhabitants of a place called Canaan, which is near Jerusalem. Go and kill everybody there, men, women, children, everybody there. This is in the Bible. The book of Deuteronomy also tells the Israelites to go and wipe out the Amalekites. Amalekites was an ancient tribe living. When Joshua enters a place called Jericho, you heard of Jericho? Very close to Jerusalem. He is told by God in the Bible to go and annihilate everybody there. What sort of a God is this? Who actually tells his people, his own prophets, to go and annihilate everybody. Moses is made to say to the Israelites from the Midians, why have you left the women and children there? Go and enslave them. This is the kind of violence, and there's more, by the way, in the Old Testament. In the New Testament itself, the New Testament is what we call the Gospels, and there are the letters of Paul in it too. In the New Testament, Jesus, in the book of Gospel of Matthew, he says, do not think I have come to bring you peace. Don't think I've come to bring you peace, I've come to bring you the sword. Now you compare that with what the Quran says. Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin. You kill one innocent soul, you have killed the whole of humanity. You save one soul, you have saved the whole of humanity. Look at what the Quran says and what the Bible says. The Bible actually promotes violence. The Quran says, وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. Do not transgress. You only fight when you are fought against. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
In the Bible then, it is correct to say that you fight to possess the land of God. In the Quran, you fight to establish justice and equality. You don't go around conquering people and killing people. You do not fight in God's name, you invite others in God's name. Udu ila sabili rabbika. And it's the concept of holy war. You know, we always are told about holy war. Haven't you heard this thing? Jihad is called a holy war. If you tell an Arab, there are a few Arabs here, mashallah. When you translate the word holy war in Arabic, it translates to Al-Harb al-Muqaddasa. And they'll say, what is that? It doesn't exist in Arabic, does it? Al-Harb al-Muqaddas. It does not exist. Because the truth is there is no concept of a holy war in Islam. Jihad literally means to struggle. Where does this concept of a holy war come from? It's an interesting question. In the year 1099, there was a pope called Pope Urban II. He summoned, the actual year was 1095. He summoned the people in 1095 in France, in a place called Clermont. And he says, the Pope is talking now, not Bin Laden. The Pope is saying that by the power of God invested in me, I want you to go and kill those heathens. You know what's a heathen? Kafir. He's referring to Muslims. I want you to go and kill the heathens in the Holy Land. And the Pope is saying this. If you are killed in battle, I guarantee you heaven. If you are killed in battle, I guarantee you heaven. It was because of him that in the year 1099, the Crusades started. Have you heard of the Crusades? And there were more than one. There was actually at least 8 Crusades. At least 8. But it's because of the Pope. That's where the concept, the holy war comes in. Because Muslims never had a concept of a holy war. In the year 1099, these Western Knights, the Crusaders, entered Jerusalem. They killed 40,000 people. Just in Jerusalem. To the extent that the blood flowed up to the ankle. The waters turned red because of the blood that had flowed. They killed not only Muslims, they killed Jews, and they killed Eastern Christians, to Christians coming from the Orthodox Church, from the East. This happened in 1099. And we have so many other examples of Christian violence against the Muslims, which even Muslims have behaved wrongly. We do not deny that. But the point is, does the Quran allow that? On the contrary, as I said, the Quran says you fight only you are fought against. You see, the problem is they quote verses of the Quran out of context. قَاتِلُوهُمْ حَيْثُمَا وَجَدْتُمُوهُمْ. Kill them or fight them wherever you find them. So, this is where the Quran promotes violence. And if I look at your own Testament, look at the Old Testament, which says go and kill everybody there. The Quran also tells you, وَإِن جَنَحَ لِلسَّلْمِ فَجْنَا إِلَيْهِ. If they offer you peace, O Muhammad, you must offer them peace in return. Because Allah loves peace. He does not love war. This is the whole concept of violence in the Quran, that it wants to promote peace and not violence. And therefore, as I've been saying, the Quran even offers protection to mushrik. Even tells us not to abuse others, because if you abuse them, they will abuse in return. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alayhi Muhammad.
Another concept that is always leveled against Muslims is that against women. Muslim women are absolutely, they are subjugated, they are oppressed. The Muslims don't know how to treat their women. My God, I think Muslim women are very liberated in that sense at least. Remember this much, because a person is wearing a veil, the hijab does not keep a woman in, it keeps a stranger out. There is a big difference. It doesn't keep a woman in. Islam says a woman can do whatever the man does as long as she's dressed modestly. The modest dressing is important because the worth, the character of a woman does not depend on how she looks. The character of a woman depends on her personality. In the West, you will see that whenever they want to sell a car or whenever they want to sell a product, you find a semi-naked woman on it. And you're wondering, what is this semi-naked woman doing on the car? What are you trying to buy, the car or the woman? When was the last time you found a semi-naked man on a car? You haven't, because then it will not sell. The point is, the woman's body is used to sell a product. Islam says no, a woman has to be respected, not degraded. Again, let us look at the Old Testament and the New Testament. What they say about women and what the Quran says about women. If you look at the New Testament, Paul says in Corinthians, he says, women must be silent. They must be submissive. Why must women be submissive? Christians are saying, not me. Women must be submissive because Eve deceived Adam. By the way, we do not accept this story at all, that Eve deceived Adam. فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانِ, the Quran says. Shaitan did waswas to both of them. Not that Eve deceived and tempted Adam. That we do not accept that at all. So this idea that Eve was the culprit and she was the reason why we fell where we are is not Islamic at all. Again, if you look at the book of Corinthians and other books in the New Testament, it says women must be subordinate to men. In other words, women must submit to men. Where does Islam say that? Where does the Quran say that women must be